my first memories were traumatic. I think in general, people have their first memories around 5, 6 years old. That's sort of my recollection, my general impression at least. But my first memories were I was 5 years old, or maybe four, maybe five, and I was standing outside a concentration camp in Chile with my mom, holding my mom's hand, and she's trying to pass food through a soldier, through a guard, to my dad who was inside. And at the time, they had created these concentration camps out of soccer stadiums because they could hold a bunch of people. And that was my first memory. I think maybe because I was scared, right? Didn't know if we were going to see my dad. He made it out, and my other childhood memories were in a refugee facility. Now that we were very lucky to be in, actually, because it wasn't for everybody. It was sort of for expat families to keep them out of trouble, to not cause international incidents, that sort of thing. And because of my mom, my dad was able to be there and be protected as well from the military junta who had taken over. And they basically had a coup against a socialist president. And of course, my mom and my dad both campaigned for that president very, very openly because they were Marxist, right? And I campaigned for him too. As a 3-year-old or something like that, my mom tells me that I was at his rallies, and I would chant, Allende, solo Allende. His name was Salvador Allende. That was the chant, and my mom spoke at one of the rallies, met the wife's the Salvador Allende's wife. I mean, it was I think it was a rally for women. Met Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda is a Nobel Prize winning poet who was also Marxist, and he campaigned for Salvador Allende. And my dad also met the president after his election. I think the president toured his factory where he was working on as an engineer. So that's the quick snapshot of the situation there.
Yeah, so is that how? So you say they were campaigning for him. What do you mean? Do you mean they were just going to the events, or they were officially part of the campaign?
No, they just went to events. But I mean, they were not officially part of the event, part of the campaign. But my mom did speak at a rally. I don't know how she actually managed to do that. So, and my dad was mad at her because apparently you're not supposed to do that as a foreigner, to speak at rallies in a different country, but she did. Yeah, she's
Okay.
a fiery lady.
And that definitely made it a public sort of
You made it
endorsement
very
with your
yeah, the
family.
secret police was very aware of who they were, apparently. But they rounded up tens of thousands of people. I mean, the the accounts vary from 50,000 people arrested literally in the immediate aftermath, all the way to 250,000 in a sort of a little bit of a longer timeline of people arrested, put in secret prisons and concentration camps, and tortured and killed thousands and thousands of people. And then they kicked out. I recently sort of checked the numbers. I think it was like 200,000 people kicked them out of the country, and we were among all those people. And for a country of like 15 million total, that's a lot of people to be kicked out. And all of these people were professionals essentially. They were not politicians. They were just intellectuals. They were people with opinions, basically, right? So there were doctors and lawyers and professors and all of that, engineers, like my
All the
dad.
people you don't want in your country.
Yeah, all the people that you actually would probably be good for the economy, but you don't want them if you're a dictator, and you don't want them to express their opinions. Yeah.
So what was so it was a coup. That means that it was a successful campaign and then it was usurped, or did the campaign
Yeah, he
fail?
was elected. He was actually the first democratically elected socialist president in history. So that's the irony of it. The irony was that he was actually elected by the people, by a vast majority. Now, how would that panned out for the economy? As somebody who got an education in economics, I look back and I go, yeah, probably would have tanked the economy, But he was democratically elected, and they overthrew him with the help of the CIA. So it was at the height of the Cold War, and the United States, they were really, really unhappy with the advance of communism in the Western Hemisphere, and it was just, it was emotions were high, right? Political emotions, and Salvador Allende was like buddy buddy with Fidel Castro, and all of that stuff. I mean, that made people up there in the United States very nervous. So it's very public knowledge that the CIA contributed to the coup.
I find these stories really interesting because I grew up not knowing how much influence the United States really exerted over other countries. And I keep learning about new ones. Like I keep learning about the banana wars that happened and how we took Hawaii and all these horrible things. And then even today, where we seem to keep replacing leaders, and that you say it's public knowledge, but it's not really broadly known, at least to Americans. We live in this weird state of ignorance around this.
Well, I think we forget, and there's so much going on that people are just not aware, especially of things that are not close to them. So we're very aware of painful things that have happened in the U.S., but less aware of things that are sort of in the periphery of their world, right? So it's totally understandable. I think every nation has that sort of self-centric view of history of political events. But yes, at the time, the U.S. Actually declared, I believe, publicly that the whole Western Hemisphere was considered a zone of vital political interest to the United States, which basically is jargon for this is our territory, don't mess with us type thing. And they just didn't want another Marxist government in Latin America. And that was it was a trend, right? I think it was El Salvador, Nicaragua, Cuba. I think Venezuela was already a socialist or Marxist country. So it was happening, and they had their reasons on why they should be worried. Obviously, I just find it ironic that in an effort to sort of protect the United States, freedom, democracy, they would opt for a unelected military brutal dictator that was their ally over our democratically elected socialist president who was actually elected by the people, right? So the irony is definitely there, right?
Yeah. And then you said your father ends up in the concentration camps, and that's your first memory is seeing him on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I didn't see him. I was just standing outside,
Okay.
and I knew he was in there, and I was staring at the soldier, and I was scared and all of that. So
How do these concentration camps compare to what most Americans will think of, which is like World War II Nazi?
it wasn't like that, but it was just basically a place where they sort of kept a lot of people in, right? And so they kept him. My dad, I've asked my dad a lot about that, how that felt from the inside and everything, but they basically had him in the stands all day long, and they fed him, and then for the night they would put him in these in the changing rooms, right, where all the whatever the teams were in offices, I guess, and stuff like that. So they spend the night in there, and then for the day they took him out, and they would interrogate people. They would take him to separate rooms and interrogate them, and they tortured as well and killed people, all of that. So yeah.
And your father, did he see any of that, or was he
He
mostly
saw
just imprisoned?
he was imprisoned. He saw some of it, yeah. So he would see people dragged out of his cell, and then brought back all beaten up. He saw the soldiers burning books like in classic fascist fashion, and then they would throw people in there as well. So he saw some of that, yeah. And he was very lucky because he was sort of considered by them almost like a high value prisoner because he studied in the Soviet Union. So they didn't torture him, luckily. And they would interrogate them for, every day for a long time and just sort of try to get under his skin. And he was one of the coolest, like cool as a cucumber kind of guy, even keeled, like just wouldn't, like he had nothing to hide, so he was very comfortable. And but he had a lot of friends, and I met a lot of those people because eventually when we were exiles in Mozambique, we were sort of in this interesting community of all Chilean exiles that came en masse to help Mozambique sort of get back on their feet after they got their independence. So all of my friends' parents, all of them, literally all of them were imprisoned. Many of them, most of them were tortured, electrocuted, just horrible things. And I sort of grew up in this very heightened, with a heightened sense of awareness of human cruelty and almost like this zeal for justice. So it's a very strange, almost like backdrop culturally to be growing up in, you know. So and like it's too early for a kid to know that they would tie women up by their hands naked and leave them hanging for days on end, you know, and do other things. And like that's those are the stories that I grew up hearing around me, with not from an external source, but the people who actually experience those things, you know. And it was that part, the torture part, was very much like the Nazis. As a matter of fact, a lot of those torture methods were trained. The special the spy agencies or whatever, whoever the people were there, they were trained by the Nazis, because then a lot of the Nazis, they escaped into Argentina and Chile, right? So a lot of the methods were actually directly, you know, borrowed from the Nazi practices.
I've heard about the Argentina theory, and I've seen videos of the town they built.
Yeah,
It's very German, and now it's
they have those
mostly
in Chile. Yeah,
as well.
yeah, they do. But a lot of those towns actually predate the coup. But I think what happened was, because it was already an established, almost like a beachhead, right, a conclave of German immigrants. I think they probably had some connections, and they gravitated towards those same people through those channels when they were trying to escape. So it sort of blended, I think, like waves of German immigration blended, I think, just through time.
It's a very dangerous mix. Were you
Very
ever in
strange, yeah.
danger outside of the camps? And how long was this period of your life?